Welcome to the Get Trauma Informed podcast, dedicated to unraveling the complexities of trauma, its pervasive impact, and the journey towards holistic recovery and realignment. If your radiance has ever felt muted, like I and thousands of others, you're in the right place to reignite your inner light. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Hi, and welcome to another amazing episode of the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Today, we have such an amazing guest. He's going to educate us and give us information. Well, take your pens and pencil out, and we'll let you know what we're going to talk about in just a second. I get a little bit excited. Mark, how are you today?
I am good. And Liz, thank you so much for having me as a guest on your podcast. I've enjoyed us getting to know each other before we came on the show. You are terrific, and I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for this.
Yes, I thank you for being here. Mark is the co-founder of an amazing law firm that works with mental health and addiction. So he gives a lending hand, and I've already gotten, to know you in this couple of days that we've been spending time together, and he has an amazing heart to help people. Mark, can you tell us a little bit more about your law firm?
So it's Astor Simovitch Law. I'm the Astor. My wife, who really is, she's just the brains behind the whole operation. I'm just the face. So she's the Simovitch. Our website, we have two actually, but the main one is the mental health addictionlawfirm.com. And our mission is to save families whose loved ones have substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. So we are speaking to families from all over the country, as far west as Hawaii, as far north as the New England area, and occasionally outside of the country. And it's usually mom and dad calling us about an adult child, not always, but most of the time. And by the time they get to us, the family is frankly sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yes.
They have been dealing with this for years and years and years. Everybody in the family is exhausted. They've probably spent a boatload of money and then some, and they come to us with the hope that we can solve this problem for them once and for all, which is what we do.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your work. When I heard about what it is that you do, I was excited to have you on the show because it works hand in hand with our message of getting trauma informed, right? Because then we have more empathy and we know how to work with our family, our loved ones that have suffered some trauma. We know that trauma is progressive, and if you swallow it, one day it comes up, and it comes up in all different types of ways. And then there's consequences behind our actions. So you help when those consequences come up, and generally when we do swallow that trauma, it festers, and then you may erupt, or you may do some things that maybe even be out of character, but you can help us with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad that, that you're talking about trauma. I think it's very important because normally the underlying issue that's going on with a case that we're working is the fact that there is trauma involved. Can you hear that in the background, by the way?
No, we're good.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I mean, normally there is some type of trauma that is involved, physical, sexual. I mean, something has gone on there. I mean, people don't develop a mental health disorder or a substance use disorder for no reason at all. I mean, there is something underlying that's causing this, the catalyst of everything that's going on. And sometimes the family doesn't know about it. Sometimes they do. And sometimes that underlying trauma comes out once the person is in treatment and is there long enough. And so I think what you're doing is very important, because I think sometimes families come to us and they say, we don't understand. Why is our loved one doing this? Why would he or she do this to themselves? Well, because if they suffer trauma, no one consciously says, I want to do harm to myself, right? No one says, I want to suffer. Nobody says, oh, I want to make my family miserable. Something has happened, and it's typically some form of trauma. So I think what you're talking about is really, really important stuff, Liz.
Thank you. I thank you for that. And we teach that in our courses and in our programs, that because of the nature of trauma, we often go through life suffering in silence, right? We don't address it. We are taught to put our face on, be resilient, and move forward. we don't understand that if we don't address it and we don't have a way, an outlet, oftentimes we go to unhealthy habits, and we don't even, sometimes those unhealthy habits are covering it up. It's anesthetizing the pain that we're suffering. So that's why this message is so important that we become aware. Mark, one of the questions that we start out with is, what does get trauma informed mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what it means, Liz, is the family has to understand what's going on here. And I think, when I was prosecutor way back in the 90s, it really was my sort of was my the first my first true legal job out of law school. I always sort of joke, thank goodness they hired me. I'd probably still be selling insurance. Um, I developed a passion for being in the courtroom during my second year of law school. And the irony was that once I came back as a full-time assistant state attorney, I started to see the same faces over and over again. And, substance use, mental illness. But at the time, back in the 90s, we didn't have all these specialty courts, courts like mental health court and drug court and veterans court. The mandate, even in the 90s and still today in Florida's criminal justice system, is to punish first and rehabilitate second. And there was this stigma around, the whole idea, somebody's using drugs or somebody has a mental health issue. They're making a conscious decision here. And so I think the idea that there could be something underlying, a trauma catalyst, I don't even think it crossed anybody's mind. I mean, we were still in the dark ages back in the 90s. And we said, well, you can go to treatment. It's a condition of probation. And if you violate, well, I guess there's no choice. We'll just have to lock you up. Well, I mean, in my experience, and I've spent a little bit of time in prison visiting clients, I don't think the state does a very good job of treating folks with some type of underlying trauma. In fact, incarcerating somebody who already has experienced trauma only re-traumatizes them. And so I think the sort of big shift is the understanding what's really going on here. Right? It's not a conscious decision. Something has triggered this, some type of trauma.
That message that you just talked about is the key point of why we're out here spreading the word to get trauma informed so that we can have a better life, better solutions. You know what I'm saying? And when you say that, definitely re-traumatizes a person when they may have been suffering in silence, and then something happens, and then they react in a certain way that costs them those consequences. Well, we still, if we just cover it up and just push them into the system, there's still no real resolve. And the CDC states that 70 to 80% of our population have suffered some form of trauma. That resonated with me. 20 to 30% is supporting somebody that have gone through trauma. That means that everybody, in some form or fashion, trauma has touched us.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen all different types of trauma. I mean, I've seen a number of instances where people have suffered a traumatic brain injury. So, I had a young man that I think he was in his 30s. When he was 15, he was playing baseball. He was the pitcher and got hit with a line drive, knocked him out cold. Okay, and ever since then, his life has gone in a completely different direction, and he started to use drugs, and so everything after that caused him to go downhill. But it was physical trauma that did it, right? I have had other instances where I had an interview with a family, God, about 3 months ago, and they had an adult daughter. I think she was in her early 30s, and it turned out that we believe that she had a sibling, and we believe that we believe the brother's friend, when she was much younger, sexually assaulted her repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kept inside the family. Nobody talked about it. But I knew from, you speak to a couple thousand people, you sort of know what trauma looks like, even if no one's willing to admit it or
Yes.
recognize it. I knew when they started to give me the facts, because she was starting to act out sexually. Now, I'm not a clinician, but if it looks like a duck and quacks, it's probably a duck. And I said, And I said to the family, has she ever been sexually assaulted? And there was like this pregnant pause, and they said, yeah, we think that when she was much younger, her brother's friend sexually assaulted her. And I said, yeah, okay, I
Right.
get it, right? And sometimes the family wants to talk about it or knows about it, and sometimes they don't. But it's all different kinds of things. I've seen professional athletes football players, right, who probably repeatedly suffered some type of head trauma, just a part of what they did. And now they're really having issues. So
Absolutely.
trauma can be all different types of things, Liz.
Absolutely, absolutely. We did a podcast with an amazing doctor, dentist, actually, and he specialized in head traumas and concussions. And he talked about some of the cases that he had where with athletes with the impact of their brain being impacted by the falls, by the bumps and everything and such, that he'd seen that happen where it was a personality shift because of that trauma or that closed head injury. And so, he's an advocate for making sure that we have the proper mouth gear. And so it definitely is things that we don't even think about. And because we're in such a society that is just keep going, no matter what, get up, keep going, keep going, keep going. And I say, no, we have to stop and figure out what that situation is, what that root cause was, get some type of resolve to it. Now we can move on and push forward. And I'm an advocate for being resilient, but we have to uncover what the challenge is or what that trauma is. And then also understand that different types of trauma affect people differently depending on what type of environment they were raised in. I openly talk about my traumatic story from the womb, and people don't. I haven't heard people talk about womb trauma. That's also a thing. If a child or someone has come from domestic violence, such as I come from domestic violence, and you have a trauma on top of a trauma on top of a trauma, now you develop complex PTSD, and you are now you see life through a kaleidoscope. When we were little and we saw the kaleidoscope, well, life now looks like shattered pieces versus a clear perspective, right? But we're still expected to move through life as a mature adult when we still have shattered pieces. And that's a piece that, we continuously talk about and bring resolution to so that we can turn that around for people.
Wow. Okay, I'm learning something today, and I wasn't aware of that. In fact, it's funny you talk about that. There was about 2 weeks ago, there was a young man that was interviewed, and he was what I think they called him an abortion survivor. His the mother had gone in to have an abortion, and I'm not getting on the abortion bandwagon here, but apparently he had survived the abortion, and he had some physical injuries because I'm sure he was ripped out of the womb, and he was talking about his the trauma that he grew up with, right? I mean, not just finding out what had happened to him, but he had physical and emotional issues. I mean, he'd been ripped out of his mother's womb. And again, I'm not telling people what to do. This is not a conversation about.
Yes.
We're talking about trauma here, and he suffered trauma. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And that wound trauma, what you just described too, it rewires the brain. So it's not just, okay, this right here happened. No, it happens. It rewires the mechanisms of your brain. So now everything wasn't able to connect the way that it should have connect. So now you got mind, body, spirit, and soul disconnected, and then you're still, thrown into a situation. We don't know what that traumatizing situation was. If he was the survivor of an abortion, that means he has all of these stress hormones that are working in his body as well. That plays a big effect on how we move through life and the decisions that we make.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Imagine driving down the road, enjoying a beautiful day when suddenly a tree jumps out in front of your car. Crash! In an instant, your life is flipped upside down, both physically and psychologically. That was my reality. I'm Liz Blanding, a certified holistic wellness and trauma recovery coach. In a time when, according to the National Center for PTSD, the epidemic of trauma is on the rise, 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. That's 223.4 million people who could benefit from support on their journey to recovery. To address this, I launched the Get Trauma Informed podcast in March 2024. Our podcast offers free information, resources, expert advice, and stories of those who have overcome trauma and shifted from surviving to thriving. The podcast has the capacity to reach hundreds of thousands of people. I believe that by partnering with the Get Trauma Informed podcast, we can provide critical support to many more people who need it. Trauma was not their fault, but recovery is their responsibility. And with your support, we can help them to achieve it. Thank you for considering the partnership opportunity. I look forward to the possibility of working together to make a significant impact on trauma recovery. Email us at info@oasiswellnessctrs.com or contact us at 616-320-0703. Now we will return to our Get Trauma Informed conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're learning that we're much more fragile than we think we are, right? And yet we have, especially young men, we have this warrior mentality, right?
Yes,
Ticking, keep on ticking, right?
absolutely.
And that is, I don't like. I think you made a good point, which is eventually it comes out, right? At some point.
It's progressive. It's progressive, and because we've become masters at hiding, masters at swallowing it, masters at continuing to move forward. We don't understand that it's not. It didn't go away. It's just sitting there festering, and it festers like old rotten food. And then somebody cuts you off in traffic, or somebody does the simplest thing to you, maybe even unaware, and then all of a sudden that trauma blows up and it erupts. And now you have this whole situation where how many times have we heard people say, wow, this was such a quiet person, or such a mild-mannered person, or what have you. It was that trauma that was unresolved. And that's why I continuously preach that message that if you've gone through trauma, let's get rid of the shame, get rid of that so that we can handle it before it becomes something that's monumentous. And then, I applaud you for the work that you're doing. And that's why I got so excited about having this conversation, because we don't want to just scratch the surface of the challenges or the issues, but we want to bring real resolve. And for people to know, part of why oftentimes we do suffer in silence is because we don't know that there's help available. And what you're bringing, what your company is bringing, is real resolve, saying, hey, no, it does not have to be the end of the world for you because you made a mistake or because you operated out of trauma. There is real help and resolve. There's real resolution for you. So I applaud you for the work that you're doing. I'm excited about it and excited about this message coming out.
Yeah, I mean, look, when somebody is suffering, and you pointed out that over time it progresses, right? It's like a festering. I mean, if the individual's is not able to make the decision for themselves for whatever reason, then somebody else has to make that decision to save them. It's either going to be the family, or at some point, the state has to step in, either through the criminal justice system or the mental health system. And I've operated on both of those for the last 31 years of my legal career, and I've never seen the state do a great job yet. Not because they don't care, they just don't. I mean, they are dealing with thousands of people. You can't treat a disease and just run somebody through a mill. It takes individual attention, and so somebody has to make the decision to save somebody. And that's where we come in, right? We're going to empower the family and give them the ability through the court system to make a decision that a loved one can't, which is to save themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And on my end, the awareness piece is also getting into organizations, getting into corporations, getting into churches to say, listen, this is the challenge. And so if we can help more people to become aware, then there's more help available, there's more support available, there's more real solutions. And ultimately, it just makes it a better place for us all to live, a safer place for us to live, and that's a part of it. When you go through trauma, the safe space is gone. You no longer have a safe space. So there's a lot of dynamics to it. And I'm just, again, like I said, very, very grateful to know that a service such as yours, that a law firm such as yours exists.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're going to
Yeah.
try to get it all over the country, right? Now we're only in Florida and Massachusetts.
Oh my
I
goodness.
tell people, come to Florida. It's a great place to come. We have great
Yes.
down here, and we also have these laws on the books that allow us to help a family to make a decision to save somebody. Not so easy to do it in other parts of the country. They just don't have the legal system. And our judges are very switched on down here. They understand what we're dealing with, what we're trying to do. That makes a big difference. So come to Florida. And if you don't know how to get here, we'll help you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think you've already answered this question, but one of the other questions that we ask is how has trauma empowered or inspired you? But you've been saying it throughout the podcast. It's inspired what you do.
Well, so it's, this, I think as a lawyer, I think for all of us, but I know at least for me as a lawyer, it was about finding a group of people that I could help. I told you I was prosecutor. I did defense work for a number of years. I made a lot more money. I was pretty miserable, actually. I got married and divorced. I just got remarried to my law partner, and I married for different things. You get older, you marry for different reasons. You appreciate the inner beauty as much as you do the outer beauty. I think as you get a little older, right? But for me, it was about finding a mission, a group of people that I could help. And about 12 years ago, I met somebody who became a mentor that really told me that financial growth has to be preceded by personal growth. Right. And so for me, that year of personal growth, working on myself, helping other people work on their businesses, because that's what we were doing. And that was, I think, the catalyst for me to finally say, okay, I'm ready to go do this. And okay, I had to figure out who was I going to help. Well, I had close family members and friends who had drug issues, mental health issues. And I said, okay, that's who I'm going to help. Now, at the time, I had no idea how I was going to do it. I'd obviously worked in the criminal world for a long time. I knew a little bit about the Marchman Act, which is a statute that's unique to Florida that we still use to this day. And it's funny, we talked about, right, opening up a business in the library, because at the time I was broke. I had no money, but I had an idea and I had a mission. And I sat myself down in the library right here in Boca. They had free Wi-Fi, and there's this awesome little coffee shop that had great coffee, and it wasn't expensive. So I sat myself down, and I created a spreadsheet of all the people I knew. I smiled, I dialed, and I went around handing out the cheapest business cards I could possibly have made at Vistaprint. And I said, I'm here to help these people. And eventually the phone started to ring. And but it was a grind, and it took me a little while to make enough money where I could afford an office. And 11 months in, I lost my dad. So that was, it was stressful, and I didn't have a lot of money. And I don't know how the hell I ever paid for his funeral, but I did. And so, we talk about trauma, right? I mean, I think about my dad every day, and to sort of, I have his photograph in my office. Now, is that the same trauma that somebody suffers if they got hit in the head with a baseball, or a young lady who was sexually assaulted? Of course not. But still, I mean, you lose a parent. It's something you don't get over. You just learn to live with it. And so I think we've all suffered some form of trauma, but I used it to empower, to really motivate me to go out and help as many people as I can. And it's what motivates me to drive my team, to do better work, to help more people. And so, frankly, Liz, having the opportunity to share what I do, I mean, to me, I consider this an honor to be on your podcast, whether it's heard by one person or a million people. It's an honor to
Yes.
be here with you.
I
It really
thank you.
is
I thank
part
you.
of the
And
journey.
yeah, the feeling is absolutely mutual. And you said that about, the two different traumas and the way trauma affects us. And that's what makes it such a broad topic and touches so many people, because the different types of trauma that we don't even realize. Even, a part of the business that we do is to help people with financial trauma relief, right? Because people don't understand that, like what you just said, that what you experienced could have caused somebody to go under the covers and not come back out, right? Just go under and just go into, but you chose to push that into an empowering business, right? And so you use that as fuel, rocket fuel, to fuel you to where you are. And being able to share that story, we're all over the world, and I just get so excited when I go back and I look at our stats and I see all of the people that are tuning in from all over the world, that are receiving the message, that are understanding that they're not alone, understanding. And what you're bringing today too is that, helping people to take one step towards a safer place. right? And that there are people out here that truly care and can provide services to help. So I would love to see your business franchise all over the world. We're going to put that out there. I believe in positive affirmations and speaking intentional and purposeful. So I put that out there because that service is absolutely necessary. What would you say to someone that was faced with trauma?
I mean, I think that you have to reach out for help, and that's easier said than done, right? I think that if you're going to start turning to recreational drugs, and I know here in Florida, the legalization of marijuana has been a significant problem, right? It has really fueled mental illness, and I don't think you could use, prescription drugs or recreational drugs as a way to deal with trauma. You're just putting a band-aid on the situation. And like you said, at some point it just explodes, right? And that band-aid's not going to be there to keep it in. So if you need help, the time to ask is like right now, because the longer you wait to ask for help, the harder it is to get help. And the further down the proverbial rabbit hole you are in terms of the challenges that come along with treating trauma. So I think, ask for help. Now, look, if you're just somebody who can't help, then maybe the family can intervene, right? You don't have to hire me as a lawyer. I'm a big fan of doing an intervention, right? Which is a much softer, gentler way of getting somebody into treatment. But when families come to us, and this has been going on for years and years and years, and they've tried everything they know of, and somebody either won't go to treatment or just won't stay in treatment, then yeah, I mean, at some point, somebody has to make that decision to save their loved one. And really, as my late father used to tell me, when it comes to making these decisions, it really is a family decision. And we're just here to give you some options. And then you decide what's right for your family, right? For a lot
Yes.
of families, this is the last, this is the last port of call, right? And we're here. And I tell families, look, I don't have a magic pill. If I did, I'd give it to you. If I had a magic wand, I'd wave it. What I have is hope, right? Recovery takes time. When someone's been sick, right? When they were traumatized 20 years ago by whatever it was, um, and they've been suffering in silence for a long time, it takes time to get back, in the game of life. And I tell the families, while your loved one is dealing with their trauma, I want you to deal with yours. Because believe it or not, watching a loved one who's been sick for years and years and years is traumatizing in and of itself. They may not know it, but I promise you, by the time they come to us, the parents, if it's mom and dad, have not had a good night's sleep in years. They are exhausted. And when I ask them, "Are you tired? When was the last time you had a good night's sleep?" They're like, they're like, "Wow, somebody else. We're not the only ones who are dealing with this." I'm like, "Yeah, well, speak to a couple of thousand families over the years. They start to tell you, no, we can't sleep at night. We're fighting. The siblings have left the house. Our family has become completely dysfunctional." And so what's happened is while their loved one is dealing with this, the rest of the family is also traumatized. They just don't
Yes.
know it, and
Absolutely.
they need help too. So,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
everybody can heal.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I definitely thank you for that. Mark, if someone's in your area, can you tell us how they can get in contact with you and which areas you service?
Right. So we service all over Florida. We also service in Massachusetts. So you can find us online. The website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. Or just Google me, Mark Astor, attorney. One of the things I've made also part of my mission is to give content away for free. So pretty much every day I throw out a video to talk about, you know, different aspects of what we do, because I'm a big believer that people need to be able to get the information. I mean, they can go, listen, you could Google the Marchman Act or the Baker Act. I mean, it's on Google. But if you want to know how it really works in the real world, then yeah, I mean, I've got content for that. And I'll tell you, I talk about real cases and how it really works. And then you can decide if you want a lawyer to help you. And so I'm all over social media. And well, now I'm on your show. I'll probably be even easier to find.
Absolutely. And we're going to make sure that we put your information in the show notes. And
Yeah,
Mark, it's been such a pleasure. This is the beginning of something big. I'm already going to put that out there. I love the connection. I love your heart. And I thank you so much for what you do. You are appreciated. You are truly appreciated.
for having me on the show, Liz. So lovely to connect with you.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And thank you all for tuning in, and we'll make sure that we have all the information in the show notes. Have an amazing, amazing day, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.
It's time to buckle up. No more suffering in silence. Our Power Pack journey to recovery and realignment starts now. Remember, you were collateral damage on someone else's warpath. Trauma is not your fault. Recovery, however, is your responsibility. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast.